You may believe he truly likes you because he keeps returning, draws you close when you're alone, and looks at you as if nobody else exists. Then suddenly he disappears again, leaving you replaying every conversation and wondering what you did to cause it. What did you say? What changed? The truth may be much simpler than you think. You did not necessarily do anything wrong. An avoidant man can easily share physical intimacy with you, message you late at night, appear whenever it suits him, and make you feel incredibly important while everything remains within his comfort zone. But once the relationship starts demanding genuine emotional closeness, vulnerability, and consistency, he may retreat. Yet there is an important difference when his feelings are genuinely deep. If an avoidant man truly loves you, his behavior starts revealing something much quieter and more meaningful than dramatic declarations or romantic gestures. Most women naturally look for obvious proof of love. They expect meaningful words, thoughtful surprises, flowers, constant communication, or some grand declaration that finally makes everything clear. But avoidant love often does not arrive in such an obvious package. It tends to appear through small behavioral changes that can easily be overlooked if you are focused only on what he says. If you have spent time questioning whether an avoidant man genuinely cares about you or simply enjoys having you available when it suits him, pay close attention to these differences. They can completely change the way you interpret his behavior. And before we continue, if this situation feels familiar, comment the word avoidant below. It may help you recognize that you are not the only person trying to understand this confusing pattern. And if you value this kind of relationship clarity, subscribe to Avoidant Connection for more insights. To understand what genuine love looks like in an avoidant man, you first need to understand what is happening underneath his behavior. Forget the complicated textbook definitions for a moment and think about what this actually looks like in everyday life. Many avoidant people learned early that depending on someone could lead to disappointment, rejection, criticism, or emotional pain. Somewhere along the way, they developed the belief that needing another person was unsafe. Their nervous system essentially learned, I am better off handling things myself. I cannot depend too much on anyone. The closer someone gets, the more vulnerable I become. That strategy may have protected them when they were younger, especially when they did not have better tools for handling emotional pain. Independence became protection. Emotional distance became security. Keeping people at arm's length became a way to avoid experiencing the kind of rejection that once felt unbearable. The difficulty is that the strategy that once helped them survive can become the very thing that prevents healthy relationships later in life. Genuine intimacy requires emotional openness. Deep connection requires allowing another person to see parts of you that are uncomfortable, uncertain, and imperfect. And those are precisely the areas an avoidant person may have spent years learning to protect. So instead of allowing emotional closeness to develop naturally, he may keep the relationship on safer ground. He may prefer playful conversations, casual encounters, physical chemistry, or situations where neither person has to expose too much emotionally. Physical intimacy can feel particularly manageable because it creates closeness without necessarily requiring emotional honesty. He can experience touch, attraction, and connection without having to explain what he feels or admit that he needs someone. That is why physical access alone should never be mistaken for emotional commitment. Someone can desire you deeply while still avoiding the vulnerability required to truly know you. This is an important distinction because a man repeatedly returning for physical connection while consistently avoiding emotional depth is not automatically demonstrating love. He may have found a way to experience closeness while avoiding the emotional risk that scares him. That can feel incredibly intimate from your side because the moments themselves may be intense and genuine. But intensity is not the same thing as emotional availability, and convenience is not the same thing as commitment. You deserve to understand that difference instead of constantly interpreting physical affection as proof that the relationship is becoming deeper. I know you may be thinking, but when we are together, he is so different. He holds me close. He looks at me in a way that feels completely real. He seems like he does not want the moment to end. And I believe you. Those moments may absolutely be genuine. The problem is not necessarily that he feels nothing. The problem is that he may struggle to remain emotionally present once those feelings become too intense. An avoidant man can sincerely want closeness and still become frightened by what closeness requires. He may move towards you, because he genuinely misses you, feels connected to you, or wants your presence. Then, once he realizes how emotionally exposed he feels, anxiety starts building. The same person who wanted you close a few hours ago may suddenly need space. From your perspective, it can feel like he changed his mind overnight. But internally, he may be trying to regain the emotional distance that makes him feel safe. That does not excuse disappearing, inconsistency, or hurtful behavior. Understanding the pattern should never mean accepting behavior that repeatedly damages you. It simply gives you context, and context matters because when an avoidant man develops genuinely deep feelings, he usually does not transform overnight into someone completely secure and emotionally expressive. Instead, you begin noticing small moments where he does something that goes against his usual protective pattern. The first major sign is that he stays when things become uncomfortable. Think about how significant that is for someone whose instinct is usually to create distance when emotions become intense. If a difficult conversation begins, and his first impulse is normally to shut down, disappear, change the subject, or physically leave, then choosing to remain present carries real weight. It may not look romantic at all. There may be no dramatic confession or emotional breakdown. He might simply stay on the phone while you discuss something difficult. He may remain in the room during an argument instead of finding an excuse to leave. He may listen even when the conversation makes him uncomfortable. He may admit that he does not know what to say rather than ending the interaction completely. Those actions can seem ordinary if you are looking for dramatic proof of love, but for someone who normally regulates discomfort through distance, staying can represent genuine emotional effort. He is tolerating discomfort instead of immediately escaping it, and that can be a meaningful sign that the relationship matters to him. The second sign is that he begins revealing parts of himself that he normally keeps hidden. This does not necessarily mean he suddenly tells you his deepest secrets in one emotional conversation. Sometimes vulnerability looks surprisingly ordinary. He might tell you about an embarrassing experience from his past. He may admit that something scares him, even though he usually jokes about it. He could share a painful memory from childhood or explain something about himself that he normally avoids discussing. What matters is not how dramatic the story sounds. What matters is that he allowed you to see something unprotected, and after sharing it, you might notice him become quieter or pull back slightly. That can happen because vulnerability itself may leave him feeling exposed. He may immediately wonder whether he said too much or whether you will judge him differently now. But the important part is that he opened that door anyway. He allowed you to see beyond the confident, independent version of himself and gave you access to something more authentic. That kind of disclosure is very different from simply sharing physical chemistry. Someone can sleep with you without telling you anything meaningful about their inner world. But when an avoidant man begins trusting you with experiences, fears, insecurities, or memories he usually protects, something deeper may be developing. It suggests that he is gradually testing whether emotional closeness with you can actually feel safe. He is showing you a version of himself that cannot be controlled as easily as the confident exterior he presents to everyone else. And you should pay attention to those moments instead of dismissing them because they are not dramatic. For an emotionally guarded person, vulnerability is often expressed through small openings rather than sweeping declarations. He may not say, "I am letting you into my world." Instead, he gives you a small piece of that world and watches what you do with it. Your response to those moments can matter enormously because trust is often built through repeated experiences of being seen without being rejected. The third sign is that you may notice subtle jealousy, although this needs to be understood carefully. Jealousy by itself does not prove love, and it should never be used as an excuse for controlling or possessive behavior. What matters is the change in his emotional response when he realizes that other people could potentially occupy your attention. If he truly has no emotional investment, another man's interest in you may barely register, but when his feelings become deeper, certain situations can suddenly affect him in ways he does not fully understand. He may become noticeably quieter when you mention another man. He may ask questions that sound casual but seem strangely specific. Perhaps he becomes more attentive after hearing that you spent time with someone else. He may not openly admit that he is bothered, and he may even try to act completely indifferent. But his behavior can become slightly different. The important point is not that jealousy equals love. It is that emotional investment can make the possibility of losing you feel much more real. The fourth sign is that he starts reaching for you during ordinary daytime life, not only during private or convenient moments. This distinction is incredibly important. Late-night messages can feel intimate because the conversation is private and emotionally charged. But privacy can also make connection easier for someone who struggles with commitment. There is less pressure to integrate you into his actual daily life. Daytime is different because that is where ordinary reality happens. When he calls you in the middle of a normal afternoon simply because he wants to hear your voice, that tells you something different. When he makes plans ahead of time instead of contacting you at the last second, that matters. When he remembers something you mentioned days earlier and reaches out about it, that matters too. He is beginning to include you in his normal routine rather than keeping you confined to moments of loneliness, desire, or convenience. Pay attention to whether he only appears when the world is quiet and private, or whether he gradually starts making space for you in the ordinary parts of his life. The fifth sign is what happens after he pulls away. An avoidant man may still retreat even when his feelings are genuine. Loving someone does not automatically erase years of emotional defenses or suddenly give him perfect relationship skills. He may become overwhelmed, go quiet, or temporarily create distance because that is how he has learned to regulate emotional pressure. But the important difference is what happens afterward. Does he simply return as though nothing happened and expect access to you again? Or does he come back willing to acknowledge what occurred? A genuine shift begins when he takes responsibility for the distance instead of pretending it never happened. He might explain that he became overwhelmed. He may acknowledge that his silence affected you. He could apologize, clarify what was happening internally, or make an effort to handle the next difficult moment differently. That does not mean every retreat disappears forever. It means he starts recognizing the impact of his behavior and becomes willing to participate in repairing the connection instead of repeatedly resetting the relationship whenever things become emotionally uncomfortable. Yes, he may still pull away. That part may not disappear simply because his feelings are genuine, but something important changes when the connection truly matters to him. He eventually comes back with some awareness of what happened. It may not be a perfect apology or an emotional speech explaining everything. He may simply admit, "I know I disappeared for a while," or tell you, "I got caught up in my own head." Maybe he does not even have the words and instead returns with more consistency and presence than before. That behavior can communicate something powerful. I know I created distance, and I am choosing to reconnect. A man who only returns because he wants comfort can come back as though nothing happened. He expects access without accountability. But when you genuinely matter to him, some part of him recognizes that his absence affected you, and he makes an effort to close the distance instead of pretending the rupture never existed. The sixth sign is that he gradually starts placing you inside his future. This can be difficult for an avoidant man because conversations about the future can feel like pressure. Mention something months away, and he may become uncomfortable. Talk about long-term commitment, and he may suddenly become distant. The reason is that looking ahead can make the relationship feel more permanent, and permanence can trigger fears around vulnerability and dependence. But when his feelings deepen, you may notice smaller changes first. He might casually say that the two of you should visit somewhere together. He may make plans several weeks ahead instead of only deciding what to do at the last minute. He might remember an activity you once said you wanted to experience and later suggest doing it together. Perhaps he begins mentioning you naturally around friends or family. These moments matter because he is allowing himself to picture tomorrow with you in it, even if he is not ready to talk about forever. The seventh sign appears when you are no longer easy, cheerful, attractive, or emotionally effortless. Pay attention to what happens when life becomes difficult for you. If he only appears when everything is exciting and uncomplicated, that tells you something. But genuine attachment becomes much easier to recognize when you are struggling. Maybe you are dealing with pressure at work, family problems, exhaustion, illness, or simply a period where you do not feel like your best self. Does he disappear because you are suddenly requiring emotional energy, or does he find some way to support you? His support may not look like the kind of romantic care you imagined. He might solve a practical problem, send you something thoughtful, check in more frequently, or quietly make your situation easier. He may not always know how to sit beside you and talk about feelings for hours, but if he genuinely cares, you will notice some form of effort when you are struggling. Love becomes much clearer when being there requires something from him. The eighth sign is that he becomes unexpectedly nervous around you. This is easy to miss because an avoidant man may normally appear composed, independent, and completely in control. But when someone genuinely matters to him, that confidence can occasionally crack. He may overthink a message after sending it and wonder whether he said too much. He might become unusually uncertain about how you interpreted something. Perhaps he tries harder than usual to impress you, almost in a playful or slightly awkward way that does not match his normal personality. You may even notice him becoming more self-conscious around you. That nervousness is not automatically proof of love, but it can reveal that your opinion carries unusual weight for him. He cares about how you see him. The possibility of disappointing you actually matters. For someone who usually protects himself by appearing detached and unaffected, allowing another person's opinion to have emotional influence is a significant form of vulnerability. The ninth sign is that he protects your place in his life, even when you are not there to hear it. This does not mean he needs to confront everyone dramatically or become possessive. It is much quieter than that. Imagine someone dismissing you, making an unfair comment about you, or assuming that you are merely a casual person in his life. If he cares deeply, he may correct that assumption instead of simply laughing along. He may not allow people close to him to reduce you to something that does not match how he actually sees you. Perhaps a friend makes a comment and he calmly sets the record straight. Maybe someone questions why he spends so much time with you, and he does not pretend that you are insignificant. These moments can reveal how much emotional importance you carry for him. When someone becomes meaningful, you naturally begin caring about how they are represented when they are not around. If you ever discover that he has spoken about you respectfully or defended your importance when you are absent, do not automatically dismiss that. It can reveal a level of investment that is easy to miss. The 10th sign is surprisingly simple. He becomes comfortable being quiet with you. That may not sound romantic, but for an emotionally guarded person, it can be deeply intimate. Some people can maintain relationships as long as there is constant entertainment, conversation, flirting, physical chemistry, or some activity keeping the emotional atmosphere moving. Silence gives you nowhere to hide. When two people can sit together without constantly filling every empty second, there is a different kind of closeness present. There is no performance to maintain and no distraction protecting either person from simply being there. If an avoidant man reaches a point where he can sit beside you, share a quiet moment, and not feel compelled to escape, that can indicate growing safety. He does not need to constantly manage the interaction or keep everything light. He can simply exist around you. For someone who has spent years protecting himself through emotional distance, allowing another person into his quiet space can be one of the clearest forms of trust. Now, I want to slow down here because some of you may be comparing these signs to your own situation and feeling both hopeful and uncertain. Maybe he does several of them, but not all. Maybe you see moments of genuine connection followed by periods where he becomes distant again. And I want to be honest about something that is incredibly important. An avoidant man can genuinely love someone and still hurt them. Love does not automatically remove attachment patterns. Feelings alone do not create emotional maturity. Someone can care about you deeply while still being unable to provide the consistency, communication, and security you need. Both realities can exist at the same time, so the question cannot simply be, does he love me? You also have to ask, can this relationship actually meet my needs? Is he learning? Is he becoming more accountable? Is he gradually getting better at staying present when things become uncomfortable? Or are you watching the same cycle repeat with slightly different details every time? A man who genuinely cares and is willing to grow may still struggle, but you should eventually see movement. It may be slow, it may be imperfect. He may take 2 steps forward and occasionally 1 step backward. But there will be evidence that he is trying to become more emotionally available. He will start learning how to communicate instead of disappearing. He may become better at explaining when he needs space, rather than simply cutting you off. He may return to difficult conversations instead of avoiding them indefinitely. You will not have to imagine his growth because you will be able to observe it. On the other hand, a man who says he loves you but refuses to change anything can leave you trapped in endless uncertainty. He may repeatedly give you beautiful moments, then withdraw. He may apologize but repeat the exact behavior. He may want access to you while avoiding the responsibility of choosing you consistently. That is not evidence that you are not lovable. It is evidence of what he is currently capable of giving. You cannot care for someone so perfectly that they suddenly become ready for a relationship they have not chosen to build. You cannot be endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, or endlessly accommodating and somehow complete the emotional work for another person. You can create an environment where someone feels safe enough to grow, but they still have to make the decision to grow. That part belongs to them. And if they are comfortable remaining exactly where they are while you spend months or years waiting for the version of them you hope will eventually appear, you need to recognize what that situation actually is. It is not a relationship moving forward. It is you standing in a waiting room hoping someone eventually decides to walk through the door. You are not meant to spend your life waiting for someone to become ready. Your life is happening now. Your needs matter now. Your emotional well-being matters now. Love should not require you to put your entire life on pause while another person decides whether they are capable of participating. I also want to speak directly to anyone who has convinced herself that the physical connection is enough evidence of emotional commitment. Maybe the chemistry between you is undeniable. Maybe every time you are together, the connection feels so powerful that you think, there has to be something deeper here. And perhaps there is something real emotionally. But intensity can be incredibly misleading. Strong attraction can feel like destiny. Missing someone can feel like proof of love. Physical closeness can create an emotional high that makes everything outside those moments seem less important. But intensity and depth are not identical. A man repeatedly returning because of how you make him feel is not necessarily the same as a man intentionally choosing you because of who you are. The real test is whether he wants access to the whole of you, including the parts that require effort, patience, compromise, and emotional responsibility. Does he want the woman who is convenient, or does he make room for the woman who has needs? You do not want a relationship that survives only when you make yourself smaller. You do not want love that works only when you are endlessly available but never demanding, affectionate but never disappointed, understanding but never in need. You deserve a connection that can handle the complete version of you. So if you recognize these signs in an avoidant man, the willingness to stay through discomfort, the gradual sharing of vulnerable parts of himself, the effort to connect during ordinary daytime life, the ability to return and address what happened, the inclusion of you in future plans, the willingness to support you during difficult seasons, the nervousness that shows you matter, the respect he gives you when you are not present, and the comfort he eventually finds in simply being quiet beside you, pay attention. These behaviors can reveal genuine emotional investment beneath the surface. But remember, signs are clues, not contracts. They cannot replace an honest conversation about what you both want. At some point, you deserve clarity, not an emotional ultimatum delivered in anger, not a conversation after months of resentment have built up, not a desperate attempt to force an answer because you are terrified of losing him. Instead, choose a calm and direct conversation. Tell him what you need. Ask what he actually wants. Give him room to answer honestly, and then pay attention to what follows. Do not judge the relationship only by what he says during one emotional conversation. Watch the pattern that develops afterward. Words matter, but repeated behavior tells you whether those words have substance. Love is not simply a feeling someone experiences when they miss you at midnight or when the chemistry between you becomes intense. Love becomes meaningful through repeated choices. It is the decision to communicate, to repair, to show up, to make room, and to keep choosing the relationship even when doing so feels uncomfortable. You deserve someone who chooses you consistently, not someone who repeatedly gets close enough to make you hope and then disappears before anything solid can be built. So if you recognize yourself in this situation, do not lose yourself trying to decode every message, every withdrawal, or every moment of affection. Look at the larger pattern. Look at what he consistently does. Look at whether the relationship is becoming healthier, more secure, and more mutual over time. And most importantly, look at whether you are still being yourself inside it. If he genuinely loves you and is capable of growth, You should eventually see that love expressed through action. If he is unwilling to grow, no amount of waiting will transform the situation for him. You do not need to convince someone to recognize your value. You do not need to become easier to love. And you certainly do not need to accept almost love simply because it occasionally feels extraordinary. The goal is not to make an avoidant man choose you at any cost. The goal is to build a relationship where both people are willing and able to choose each other. If this message connected with you, comment avoidant below and subscribe to Avoidant Connection for more content that helps you understand these patterns without losing yourself in them.